Our gospel reading today comes from John chapter 9, verses 1 through 41. Jesus has an incredible knack of getting himself in trouble even when he's doing stuff good, or especially when he's doing good things. As he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Salem," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, it's someone who looks like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Salem and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." They brought him to the Pharisees, the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What did you say about him?" "It was your eyes he opened." He said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he'd been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had been born blind. And they asked him, "Is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that he now sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he's of age. He'll speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "I don't know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I've told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Then they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Here is an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born entirely in sins, and are you trying to teach us? And they drove him out. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered, and who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him. Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. He said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. Jesus said, I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, surely we are not blind, are we? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say, we see, your sin remains. This ends our reading of the word. There's a lot going on in this passage. We could focus on so many different pieces. We could look at our need to affix blame. The disciples want to know who's being punished to result in this man having been born blind. The Pharisees want someone to blame for the miracle, for doing good deeds on the Sabbath, for making them look bad by performing a miracle that they were unable to perform, or perhaps even unwilling to attempt. They want to know who broke protocol so they can punish, rather than celebrating this wondrous healing. And then there's lots of questions. Who did this? How did he do it? Who are you? Are you sure this is your son? Is he really the man we've seen every day begging? Who do you think you are, trying to teach us a lesson? The details of the story are Jesus saw a man who'd been blind his entire life. He offered him healing. The man was willing to do his part to receive healing. People were confused about what to think. The religious leaders were offended and afraid of losing face. Fingers were pointed, accusations were made. A life was forever changed, and then forever changed again. First when an unnamed man received sight, then when that man recognized Jesus as the Messiah. It's a great story that speaks of the healing power of Jesus and helps us to see him as truly the Son of God, sent into the world to make this a better place. If we aren't careful, the value of the story stops there. But we know that the Gospels are full of stories designed to teach more than the surface lessons. We aren't likely to encounter someone born blind who suddenly has vision. We aren't likely to be the ones who get that vision started. But we are the ones who can have new vision and then can help others also receive that new, better vision. It's easy for us to go through life with a very limited perspective on the world. It's easy to let ourselves fall into habits of seeing things in a certain way. For example, during World War II, Germans, Italians, and Japanese were bad. French, English, and Americans were good. So German Shepherds and Dachshunds were bad. And US-born people of Italian and German descent were bad. US-born people of Japanese descent were so bad that they had to be rounded up and forced into internment camps. In hindsight, that's not a pretty picture of our country. In hindsight, we didn't see things clearly when we were so quick to make enemies where we once saw neighbors. We learned some painful lessons from our bad decisions and bad actions toward those groups. Now, we like Germans and Italians and Japanese people. We see them in a better, more positive light. We learned not to vilify them because of their ancestry or their country of origin, and not to blame them for the things the governments were doing in those countries. What we failed to learn, though, is those lessons should be global. We shouldn't hate any people because of their ancestry or because of their government leaders and their governmental policies. I certainly don't want to be hated for being American, and I don't want to be held accountable for all of the decisions that get made in why do we think it's okay to hate people from the Middle East? Or to hate Hindu people because we can't be bothered to tell that they aren't Muslims? Jesus offers us a better vision. The more we allow ourselves to be transformed by the love of Christ that's being poured out to us continuously, extravagantly, without limit, the more we're able to see through the eyes of Jesus. Jesus healed Samaritans as well as Jews. He healed women, children, poor people, lepers, people suffering from mental illness. He healed them all. He didn't limit his good acts to only people like him. He didn't limit his love to only people like him. He erased boundaries rather than building walls. We are called to love like that, like Jesus, across boundaries until the boundaries don't exist anymore. We're called to open our eyes and see, really see our neighbors, our poor neighbors, our racially diverse neighbors, our very young neighbors, our elderly neighbors, our differently abled neighbors, all our neighbors. And once we've adjusted our vision to be more like Jesus, we're called to serve those neighbors, to pour out the love of God with the same extravagance as we have received it. It's a radical way of being in the world, to see beyond all the divisions we so easily create. We've talked recently about the lenses we use when we read and the filters we apply when we listen. In this reading, Jesus offers us a new way of seeing. He asks us to let him open our eyes and then invites us to live in a new way because of our new, more clear vision. He made it clear that seeking to affix blame is not a solution, it's a diversion. He didn't waste time trying to discover the cause of the man's blindness. He got busy fixing it. I think that's something we need to focus on when we see problems around us. Sometimes finding the cause may be helpful if it'll give us a means of repairing or preventing further damage. But sometimes we need to avoid looking for blame in favor of looking for solutions. We need to see past our own visual stumbling blocks, catch a glimpse of a neighbor instead of a person to heap our judgment upon, and find creative ways of pouring love into the divisions between us. Sometimes those divisions are within our own vision. We need to address our own preconceived attitudes toward people, address our own racism, or Islamophobia, or nationalism, or sexism, or ableism. We need to think about how we see Native Americans and make corrections if our vision is bad. We need to think about how we see immigrants and make corrections if our vision is bad. We need to think about how we see poor people or undereducated people and make corrections if our vision is bad. We need to think how we see people of different religious and different political ideologies and make corrections if our vision is bad. We need to think how we see gender and sexuality minorities and make corrections if our vision is bad. We need to think about who it is we think of as those people and make corrections if our vision is bad. Because as followers of Christ, we shouldn't have groups of those people, except as a way of reaching out to them. We also need to think about how we see ourselves and make corrections if our vision is bad. Jesus has made it very clear when we look around us, everyone we see is our neighbor, and we are to love our neighbor. Love like we love ourselves. It's a three-part commandment. Love God, love self, love everybody else. Let's open ourselves to the vision Jesus offers, where we see all of creation as worthy of our love. Let us walk in the light of love, serving our God with our whole selves. Amen. We respond to the God who offers us new ways of seeing by presenting our